Hello world, welcome back to Razor RC. It's time to do the full review of the Arrma Granite 4x4 3S BLX V3 or version 3. So what we got in front of us is a 1/10 scale electric 4-wheel drive 3S LiPo capable monster truck. And it's been out for about a month, and I've been driving it, testing it, tuning it, braking it, fixing it, all that good stuff, and wanted to share my thoughts. So the way this works, just like all my other reviews, I go through the truck, rated in 7 different categories. That's going to be electronics, build, design, performance, durability, value, and support and maintenance. And I'm going to give it a rating from 1 to 5 stars, and it is rated as compared to other 1/10 scale electric 4-wheel drive brushless monster trucks. So 3 stars would be an average score, meaning it's about average to other vehicles out there on the market. 5 stars would basically mean best in class, and 1 star would be very, very poor. So this is a direct competitor to other Traxxas vehicles like the Stampede or the Haas. The associated rival MT10 is another direct competitor to this vehicle. And if you've seen my comparison or best monster truck video, I actually did a 4-way comparison between those other 2 vehicles, as well as the low-C monster truck that is no longer being sold. So you can kind of ignore that for now. And a little spoiler, this did win my competition against those other trucks, but that was the V1 version that I own. So 2 years ago they had the V1, 1 year ago they had the V2, which is pretty much the same, just some changed electronics, actually a downgrade in the radio department, and then they came out with this, the V3. So they fixed a bunch of things. A lot of complaints I had they actually fixed, and we're going to see how this actually rates as compared to those vehicles. So first off, let's kind of take a look at this truck in detail. Here's the body, really nice looking paint scheme. Comes in red and white or green and white. Obviously, I picked the red. That is sort of my signature color. Tires are these DeBoots Fortress tires, same as the V1 and V2, although they did change the color of the wheels a little bit. They're just sort of this plain gray or gunmetal gray instead of like a black chrome color that they used to have. So we'll pop those off. Comes with 14mm hexes on the wheel, so a little bit unusual. 12mm is kind of the standard, but they are nice aluminum hexes, provide a lot of bite, and you can get 12mm adapters if you want. So basics of this truck, pretty much an all plastic vehicle, plastic chassis, plastic drive shafts, plastic shocks, plastic bumpers. The differentials are steel internals, but the ring and pinion are plastic as well. Drive shaft is plastic, so very much a plastic vehicle, although it does have metal parts in kind of the essential areas, like the wheel hexes are metal, the motor plate is metal, the differential internal gears are metal, but the rest of the drivetrain is pretty much plastic. It does have adjustable turnbuckles all throughout. They were actually lined up the correct way, so that was nice to see. Very beefy shock rod ends. So changes from the V1, they redesigned the bumper, changed the body a little bit. The shocks are pretty much the same, though they did change out the seals to silicone seals. That was one weakness of the V1 and V2. The shocks tended to leak. Everything here in the steering is pretty much the same. They did change the servo. It is now a Spectrum servo instead of an Arrma branded servo. Slightly higher torque. Does seem actually pretty good performance. They did also have to change the servo saver. You can't quite see it here, but it's kind of hidden underneath down there. Because Spectrum servos use a 23 tooth servo horn instead of the standard 25 tooth. So I think that was a little bit of a downgrade. Probably my main complaint. I wish they used 25 tooth servos, but Arrma is owned by Horizon. Spectrum is also owned by Horizon, and they've all on to basically all Spectrum electronics. Carry over ESC as before, the well-regarded BLX 100. A big fan of this ESC because it is adjustable. You can hook up like a Hobbywing program card and basically make adjustments to how it performs. IC5 connector. I don't believe it is a smart connector or anything, but it is IC5 and EC5 compatible. On the motor side, they have a 36 by 60 can motor, 3200 kV rating, and then they do have a nice heat sink and an all new fan to keep things cool. On the battery side, they use battery straps Pretty much carry over from the V1 and V2, although I did have some problems with that, and we'll talk about that. Moving on to the rear, so this is kind of their power module, so it's got the motor, pinion, and spur inside, as well as a slipper clutch. A little bit painful to get out because it's got a screw underneath. You got to pop out, you got to slide out this red thing, you got to lift up this tab, which they did redesign a little bit, but it is hard to slide this whole thing out. A little bit tricky, especially the first time, but with some prying you can get that loose. On the rear end, you know, very beefy hubs, very beefy arms, very beefy drive shafts and turnbuckles. The drive shafts are plastic, never really had problems with that. And then here are their shocks, again, a little bit longer in the rear than the front. One funny thing you'll note is that, you know, the front and rear wheels, the rear wheels don't really hang down all that much. They're actually slightly higher up than the front, so a little bit hard to tell from this angle, but yeah, they reuse these shocks in all their 3S vehicles. A little bit too long for these short arms and these big tires of the Arrma Granite, so they actually kind of had to shorten the droop. Anyways, not a big deal, but something you'll notice, you know, if you sort of have a keen eye. Rear end, they did redesign the wheelie bar a little bit and the bumper. That was, again, one area that people broke some stuff, but you know, I never really ran the wheelie bar on my V1, so that was not really a problem. So other changes they made, so the other kind of complaint is that dirt would get into this power module here. I had to clean it out quite frequently. They did go to sort of an adjustable motor mount rather than sort of these fixed position motor mount, but dirt tended to get here and in here underneath. They did kind of close it off a little bit, but it is exposed underneath by that spur gear, and dirt still gets inside. Not as bad as before, but I would say it's not completely fixed. So yeah, that's pretty much an overlook of the vehicle, and let's kind of get into the ratings. So first up is the electronics, and the Arrma Granite 4x4 has really nice electronics. One of the biggest complaints about the V2 was their radio. They came out again with a new radio. The first one had a Tactic TTX 300. The second one had a Spectrum STX2, which was pretty much bad. And then they came back out with the SLT3, which is basically kind of an updated Tactic radio. So it's backwards compatible with all your old Tactic you know, receivers and stuff, if you have any of those lying around, but it's kind of coming out with a whole new shell, new steering wheel, everything, but you can kind of see the layout is very, very similar. Really good radio. They said they increased the performance of this a little bit. I'm not sure if that's speed or latency or what, but it was quite responsive. Really nice radio, probably one of my favorite RTR radios. It does have all your basic adjustments, steering, dual rate, throttle, and steering trim. A little power button LED. The other one had it on top, which I prefer, but at least they still have an LED. Nice foam wheel, trigger feels really good, and a third channel to make adjustments up and down. Here's a power button on the back. You have steering and throttle reversing, so if your servo is upside down, you can switch it, or whatever. If you have a nitro car and you flip that around, you can reverse your throttle. And then finally it has sort of this nice new feature, which is a throttle limiter. So by default, you can flip it to 100% power, and then if you give it to someone that needs a little less power, maybe isn't driving as much experience or whatever, you can flip it down to 75 or 50. And then one undocumented feature of this radio is it does have adjustable endpoints, so you can actually adjust how far the servo turns when you turn the steering wheel left and right. That's really important because every vehicle is different. The radio and the servo does not know what car it's actually put into, so for every vehicle you do want to make sure your endpoints are set correctly just out of the box. You'll have to download the SLT3 manual to figure out how that's done, but not super hard, and I do recommend you do that out of the box. Mine was not set correctly. My left, I think, was like too far, and my right was not far enough, so go ahead and set that just out of the box. Something good to do with every RTR. Other electronics, like I mentioned, the Spectrum, I think it's the S651 or S615 servo. Not a bad servo, actually feels a little bit stronger than the Arrma version. Another complaint I had with the old Arrma Granite was that the servo saver was too weak. This one feels a little bit stiffer, so overall this servo combination is better than before performance-wise, although I do not like the 23-tooth splines on the servo. That means it's not going to fit with a lot of other servo horns out there. You'll have to buy specific 23-tooth servo horns. ESC is excellent. One of my favorite 3S and 2S capable ESCs out of the box. pretty much in any RTR. This is one of my favorite ESCs. And the motor is quite fast. This truck goes about 50 miles per hour on 3S, runs nice and cool with this heatsink and the fan. So overall, electronics are really, really good. I'm actually going to give it 4 stars. It's not perfect, really just due to the Spectrum servo. Not a big fan of the 23 tooth thing. You know, I mean, everybody's gotten a 25 tooth except for Spectrum. So moving on to the build, and the Arrma was totally fine out of the box. No real issues. Like I mentioned, the endpoints were not set quite correctly, but pretty much every RTR out there does not set their endpoints correctly. Their camber and towing and stuff set a little differently than I would have liked. Slipper was also a little bit tight. It's about 1 turn too tight for me. I definitely think it's something you'll want to check out of the box. Make sure your slipper is set not too tight. Otherwise, you can break drive shafts. You can break the plastic gears in the disc. So especially if you're running on like high traction, like the road or something like that. So definitely check that out of the box. Mine was set too tight. But overall, you know, build wise, there were no real issues. Shocks are totally fine. Discs feel really good. So out of the box, I'm actually going to give it 5 stars. It is better than average. All those things I mentioned are pretty much standard on every RTR you're going to buy. Okay, the design of the Arrma Granite 4x4 3S BLX is definitely different than anything out there. No one can, you know, accuse Arrma of copying their designs. This is very much a unique design. So it's kind of got this modular thing going. The whole, I guess they call it the electronics package, kind of comes out as one box with the ESC, the receiver, and the servo all as one unit. A little bit painful to change out the servo because you kind of have this kind of crazy wiring, you know, pathing type thing, layout, but you know, it is interesting and certainly unique and not a bad thing. The power module, again, like I mentioned, is one unit. You kind of have to go through like 4 or 5 steps to get this whole thing out. A little bit painful, but it is kind of cool. You can pull this thing out, you know, as one unit. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could kind of yank that thing out, yank this thing out, like hose down the whole truck if you want. Makes it kind of nice and easy to clean. Other things that are kind of cool, self-bleeding shocks are really neat. Probably the easiest shocks to like bleed or sort of top off the shock oil or whatever, change the fluid. Really nice design, changes O-rings and stuff's really easy. Other nice updates, they do actually have more adjustable body posts here. So the old one really only had 2 positions. They do have like more extensible body posts, so you can fit different bodies. They'll fit a little bit better. The diffs have these kind of cool diff yokes, which basically hold the diffs along with the input gear all together as one unit, so the mesh and everything is kind of held together and you can easily check that, adjust as needed. I do like that design, never seen that before. A little bit more troublesome to sort of get the diff out, but you know, it also pays itself off by making it a lot easier to set your mesh. Other changes that they did update the slipper, so that was another complaint a lot of people had. I didn't really have too much trouble with my Arrma Granite on the slipper, but definitely other people did. And on the Creighton Forest, which used a similar design, I did have some trouble there. It did tend to kind of loosen itself, so they did redesign the slipper. It's got like a little plastic nut to thread the screw into. It does use these gear light pads, which I really, really like. They're basically like a fiberglass slipper pad, hold up a little bit better to heat, don't wear down quite as much. And then they added this new fan. So a lot of new updates, pretty much addressed everything had, including another one that I had, which was like all the bearings were kind of these metal shielded bearings, sort of let in dirt, and they finally went to all rubber sealed bearings. So thank you to Arrma for that. They pretty much addressed all of my main concerns. Now, things I didn't like. I still don't like these 14mm hexes. There's really no reason for that. I know they do it for a little more durability, and you know, that way if your wheel nuts are a little loose, they don't strip out your hexes. But pretty much every other vehicle out there uses 12mm hexes. That means that if you have other wheels and tires from other vehicles, they're just not going to fit on this thing, which is, you know, kind of annoying. Power module is not completely fixed. I would say it lets in about 30% less dirt than before, but it is something you want to pull every few battery packs. If you're running on loose dirt, sand, whatever, definitely pull this out and clean out those gears, the spur gear, wipe things out. These bearings still can go bad. You know, they're lasting a little bit longer, especially now that they're rubber shielded, but these 2 bearings are pretty much the ones that go bad the quickest. They still got the plastic center drive shaft, which as far as I know is the only, like, you know, 3S capable monster truck that still has a plastic drive shaft. Everybody else has an aluminum one. So that is a downside. Not something I really had too many problems with on 3S, but I definitely did break these things on 4S, and I think a little bit of a durability concern. Lastly, there are no adjustments on this truck. No different shock locations, no real camber locations, adjustments. Pretty much this thing is designed just to be taken out of the box and just run. And you know, that's not a huge deal, but the Stampede, the Haas, the Rival MT10, they all have a lot more adjustments, different shock tower mounting locations. They even have like sway bars and stuff. So I would have preferred to see that on this truck. Now I realize it is just a basher, but you know, that is a downside to me. And finally, this truck actually wasn't too bad to work on, you know, 2 years ago, but I feel like other vehicles in this class have just gotten better and better. And so maintenance wise, it's no longer, you know, like a really easy truck to work on. It's just kind of average. So actually in the design category, I'm going to give it a worse score than before. I think I rated like a 4-star rating before, but I'm actually going to give it 3 stars. It's not so much that this is any worse than before, but I feel like the competition, other things out there do have some features and have made improvements over the last couple of years that this vehicle does not. It still has a plastic spur gear. The Haas has a metal spur gear. Still has a slipper. The Haas has a differential, center differential. Not a huge deal, but you know, there are little things that other vehicles have made improvements on. The Rival MT10 has sway bars included. So this was good before, but kind of average now. Performance-wise, I was a huge fan of my Arrma Granite V1, probably one of the best performing monster trucks out there, and the V3 again still lives up to that. Pretty much drives about the same. I did feel like I had a little bit less traction from the tires and wheels as opposed to my V1. Now I do think part of that was just due to the slipper being too tight. Yeah, definitely check that. Handling-wise, it's fair. It's not awesome. I think there are other monster trucks out there that handle a little bit better than this now. It is improved though with the new servo and servo saver. I do think it is better. The LCG chassis also helps quite a bit by not only allowing it to handle a little bit better because the weight is a little bit lower, but also if you flip this thing, it tends to land on its feet a little bit more than like a high center of gravity chassis. So I think performance-wise, this is really, really good. It's very fast, probably the fastest 3S monster truck out there, RTR. So performance-wise, I'm going to give it 5 stars. You'll want to give it 5 stars. This is about the same, if not better. So again, 5 stars in the performance category. Durability wise, I was a little surprised with my V3 Granite. I'm not gonna lie. My V1, I pretty much didn't break anything. The body got kind of beat up. I think I broke a bumper, and I did actually crack a chassis once, so I don't really consider that to be a durability issue because it was just kind of a minor thing I could have fixed. But for some reason, I've broken more things on the V3 than I did the V1. So let's kind of talk about that. First off, the rear shocks. Nice that they don't leak anymore, but I did pull a shock through the shock tower, so that screw just kind of ripped out. I also bent the, or actually broke off the rod end here on the bottom. These rod ends are not threaded on the shock shafts. That's kind of unusual. Almost every shock rod end is threaded, which I think is a little bit stronger design, so a little bit disappointed in that. And the last thing is really the battery strap. I broke a battery strap, which is really unusual. I can't even remember ever breaking a battery strap before. Maybe I have and I just don't remember, but that's not something that usually goes. So I didn't do anything crazy. It wasn't cut. It was like a brand new battery strap, but it snapped. And so yeah, that was kind of disappointing. And I also saw that CCX RC also has this truck and broke a battery strap. So again, kind of disappointing. So overall, I can't give it the same score as I did before. The V1, I rated a 5-star, or actually I think it was like 10 out of 10 basically, which is like 5 out of 5. But I'm going to give this a little bit lower score, and partly just because I broke more things, but the other reason is when this truck first came out 2 years ago, it was pretty much class leading in the durability department. But since that time, some other vehicles have made improvements. The Haas is a lot more durable than the Stampede ever was. The Rival MT10 from Associate is also pretty durable, except for the front arms. But overall, that's also a very durable vehicle. So overall, this thing was outrageously durable before. And since I grade it on a curve as compared to other vehicles in its class, I'm actually going to drop it a notch. I'm going to give it a 4-star rating in durability. Now that's not to say it's less durable than before, but just based on my experience and based on how the other trucks have improved, I can't really give it the same score as before. So in the durability category, I think it's still a super durable truck, but I'm going to give it 4 stars. It's really important to be able to get parts for your RC car. It's important to be able to maintain it, take things apart fairly easily, not spend a lot of time working on it. So I call this the support and maintenance category, also kind of like the livability category. It has nothing to do with how it drives or how durable it is, just what it's like owning this thing. Are you able to get parts and fix this and kind of get support when you need it? And so Arrma is owned by Horizon Hobby, one of the biggest brands or companies in the RC industry, certainly on the surface side. So Horizon Hobby is actually one of the best companies to work with. They're super easy to work with in terms of warranty, very lenient about sending you parts if something broke that wasn't supposed to break. I honestly feel like people kind of abuse their warranty a bit. I don't really use it unless it's something legitimate, but they are definitely easy to work with and will send you up parts. You can call them up. Now they're a little bit hard to get a hold of sometimes, especially now everyone's at home and sort of buying and breaking their RC cars, but in general they're definitely one of the bigger companies. Also part support, Arrma in the past has had problems with part support. I don't think they're bad right now, sort of relative to everybody else. I think they're average or maybe slightly above average. I don't think they're the best either, but you can definitely get parts for this thing. One of the easier brands to get parts for. Not as good as Associated or Traxxas, but still relatively good. Maintenance wise, not the easiest truck to work on. It's not bad, it's just kind of different, and I kind of feel like they did some things just kind of just for the sake of doing it. Like changing out the servo is a little bit more tricky on this than another vehicle. Taking out like the spur and pinion, again, a little more trouble on this than another vehicle. Like a Traxxas Slash or Stampede, it's just like 4 screws. You pop this whole rear end and then you can get straight to the spur. So yeah, I think it's okay in that category, but because the support side is so strong, because it is above average overall, I think, as compared to other vehicles out there, I am going to give the Arrma Granite a 4 in the support and maintenance category. It is above average. And the last category is value, and so the Arrma Granite 4x4 3S BLX sells for $320. That is a $20 increase from before. It used to be $300. I think the radio alone gets you that extra value, so this is definitely worth $20 more than the old STX2 radio. Electronics are excellent. The Spectrum servo, I'm not a huge fan of those. I have actually broken several Spectrums in the past, so not sure what the durability or reliability of this thing is, but it's been holding up so far, so really no complaints. I think it's well equipped. The electronics are excellent. Pretty much typical of other vehicles in its class with the plastic drive shafts, plastic, chassis, all that kind of stuff. So nothing super special about the value in terms of what you get, but the price is quite low. So competitors are the rival MT10, that is $300. The Stampede 4x4 VXL is $380. The Haas is $470, like an absurdly high price. So overall in the value category, I think this kills it. It's got a much better radio and electronics than the rival MT10. It's only $20 more. So it's an excellent value like it was before with the V1 and V2, 5 stars in the value category. So final thoughts on the Arrma Granite 4x4 3S BLX. First off, we're going to talk about, is it worth upgrading to this from a V1? And the short answer, I think, is kind of no. I mean, this truck is pretty much the same as before. There are some nice little changes they made, like the shock O-rings that you could just buy those separately. They're like $5 or $6. The steel bearings, hopefully you've already changed out the bearings on your V1 because those will go bad. But if they didn't go bad, then there's no reason to change them. Electronics are pretty much the same. I mean, the servo is slightly stronger, and the servo saver is definitely stronger. But you could buy like a Kimbrough servo saver for your V1 or V2, mount that on. You pretty much have the same performance. Motor, ESC, pretty much the same. I didn't really have problems with it overheating on my V1. You could buy the fan if you want, but if it's not overheating, there's really no reason to do that. Motor power module wise, I do think the slipper is worth upgrading if you're having problems with your old slipper. haven't had any problems with this one, but I never really had problems with my V1 slipper. I did on my Creighton, but the V1, you know, I pretty much just set it once and it never had problems after that. But yeah, the slipper pads are nice. The little plastic nut is nice. So if you have problems with that, yeah, maybe look into upgrading that. But otherwise, you know, there's really no reason to change it. The power module, they did make this tab a little bit easier to get at, but you know, that's not really anything big. The diffs are exactly the same as before, no changes there. The rear end's all exactly the same. The wheelie bar is slightly different, so you know, but okay, buy that if you want, but you don't really have to. Body wise, I actually feel like this might be a bit of a downgrade. For some reason, I'm just smashing in this rear end a lot more than I did before. The rest of the body is still perfect, but that rear end seems worse than before. That was a weakness on the V1, still a weakness on the V3, so you know, no real changes there. Now, in terms of the radio, yeah, this radio is fantastic, a huge improvement over the STX2. If you already have a V1 radio, which had the Tactic TTX 300, I mean, no reason to upgrade to this. They're pretty much the exact same radio. So yeah, in terms of upgrading, if you have a V1, just leave it. I don't see any reason to buy this. Now, in terms of buying this overall, I think it's a fantastic vehicle. I mean, performance is awesome. Durability is awesome. The design is okay, build was great, yeah, but overall, you know, it's a really good truck. This was my winner in the best monster truck comparison with 3 other monster trucks from the 3 other major brands. It's still a really good truck, although other vehicles have come out that sort of narrowed that gap. So overall, this was for sure the best monster truck out there. I'm not so sure it is now. I'm going to be doing a comparison with the rival MT10 and the Haas. They're all really good monster trucks, so I don't think there's anything, you can't really go wrong with buying any of those. But overall, conclusion-wise, I'm going to give it 4 stars. I think with the V1 Granite, it was definitely best in class, and I probably would have rated it just 5 stars overall. This one is not quite as good, not because the truck is any worse, it's just that everyone has sort of upped their game and improve their products. So since it's rated on a curve, you know, you have to compare it to the other vehicles out at that time. So overall, conclusion wise, 4 stars, still a fantastic monster truck. No hesitation in recommending one of these. Above average for sure as well. Is it best in class? We'll have to see. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely hit the like, share, subscribe button. Hit the add notifications button as well. Look for more videos soon, and thanks for watching.